The scorching afternoon sun baked the earth. At Dragon City No. 9 Middle School, Grade 12 Class 6, the classroom was as sweltering as a steamer and the students were all drowsy. The teacher brandished an alloy battle saber in one hand and gripped a hideous specimen in the other, screaming at the top of his lungs on the podium. "Look at me! Quick, look at me! If you don't look at me, how will you know what monsters look like?" In the back row of the classroom, a boy with messy hair suddenly woke up and let out a scream. Both the students and the teacher were startled. "Meng Chao?" Deep red sleep marks remained on Meng Chao's face, and his expression was filled with panic, as if he had just woken from a long nightmare. He scratched his hair and looked around, his dazed eyes suddenly freezing when they hit the blackboard. It was covered with dense saber technique insights, torque analysis of the battle saber, speed, angle, and depth of the blade, the maximum strength of monster carapaces, and various complex formulas, all mandatory questions for the high school graduation exam. Two giant lines of text loomed. 50 days to the high school graduation exam. Study hard and make progress every day. Glorify our planet and dominate the other world. Is this my high school classroom? Meng Chao's mind was in a daze. Didn't I die? How did I return to my senior year right before the high school graduation exam? This is even worse than death. In an instant, a splitting headache set in, and countless memory fragments rushed into his mind like a torrential flood. What? Dragon City fell? I failed the high school graduation exam and was battered by society for decades, only to end up as a third-rate expert? But my sister, with her extraordinary talent and the Night Devil bloodline, became the legendary Night Witch, one of the most terrifying boss-level powerhouses in the entire otherworld? Meow meow meow, what on earth is this development? Meng Chao was struck by lightning. He tried to recall the details, but the nightmare faded quickly, leaving only scattered flashbacks. In a daze, a familiar big black face leaned in. "Meng Chao, don't affect other students by sleeping in class." Meng Chao blurted out. "Teacher Yen, you're still alive?" The whole class was first met with dead silence, followed by an uproar. Everyone admired Meng Chao's death-seeking courage to the point of utter prostration. You must know that teacher Yen Dongxing, who taught this 100 battles saber technique class, was the feared Yen the Devil. It was said that back in the military, he was a famous iron-blooded instructor who killed monsters as easily as chopping dumpling filling. To dare to tease even Yen the Devil, he truly lives up to his reputation as the former number 1 tough guy of Class 6. "Meng Chao, we will give you a grand burial." Tears of sympathy rolled down the students' faces as teacher Yen Dongxing's face, usually as black as the bottom of a pot, instantly turned beet red. "Student Meng Chao, care to explain?" He gripped the monster's skull specimen, his voice calm yet hiding a lethal intent. "This is bad." Meng Chao's pupils contracted. At this moment, his perception of killing intent was 10 times that of his classmates. Stimulated by this lethal aura, he quickly snapped back to reality. "Sorry, Teacher Yen, I was too exhausted from studying last night and dozed off. I had a nightmare." Meng Chao struggled to capture the flashbacks in his mind and said uncertainty. "I seem to dream of overwhelming otherworld creatures, specifically the cruel and howling kind, swarming toward Dragon City like a flood. We couldn't stop them, and our century-old home was destroyed. I woke up in terror. And then, Teacher Yen, you were incredibly heroic in my dream, a martyr revered by everyone. I was just deeply mourning your memory, and when I opened my eyes and saw you walking over, I was so overcome with joy that I couldn't help myself." "Wait a second." Yen Dongxing raised his eyebrows. "So in your dream, Dragon City fell, and I died as well?" He wore a faint mocking smile. The monster's skull creaked and groaned under the tightening pressure of his grip. "This?" Meng Chao scratched his head. Having just returned from the nightmare, his survival instinct was in overdrive. "Rest assured, teacher, you died peacefully without a hint of pain." Meng Chao wasn't lying. He vaguely remembered Yen the Devil being devoured by a 100-toothed giant maggot. It was torn to shreds in just 2 or 3 seconds. He didn't even have time to let out a scream. So, there shouldn't have been any pain, right? Crack! Yen Dongxing crushed the monster's skull with a single hand. "Dragon City will fall? That's simply laughable. Stand against the wall. Head up, chest out, stomach in, and stick your butt out." Meng Chao looked troubled. "Teacher Yen, how am I supposed to stick my butt out while standing against the wall?" "What?" Meng Chao felt a jolt, instantly finding the feeling of being 17 again. He stuck his butt out, his face filled with determination. The iron-blooded instructor was fuming, his eyes bulging wider than a monster's. "I won't mention your usual slacking off, and I can't be bothered to care about you sleeping in class, but student Meng Chao, Just what is in your head for you to dream about the destruction of Dragon City? Tell me loudly. 50 years ago, when our Dragon City crossed over to this other world, there was no coal, no oil, no electricity, nothing at all. There were only plagues and zombies everywhere. Back then, did Dragon City perish, sir? Dragon City did not perish. After the zombie crisis, the fog descended, and monsters appeared. Countless martyrs sacrificed their blood to carve out survival space inch by inch from between the monsters' teeth. Yan Dongxing continued to roar. In just the first 10 years of the monster war, we lost a third of our population. At the most tragic point, monsters broke into the city center every day, and humans fought them in every shopping mall, every residential community, and every single bathroom. Tell me, did we yield? Did Dragon City perish? Sir, we did not yield, and Dragon City did not perish. Facing the spray of the iron-blooded instructor's spit, Meng Chao looked as though he were ready to die for the cause. Yan Dongxing's anger subsided slightly as he said solemnly, "Very good. Whether it was the crossing, the zombie outbreaks, or the monster invasions, the crises that failed to destroy us only made us stronger. After half a century of struggle, today's Dragon City has secured its footing in this other world. Compared to when we first arrived, our territory has tripled, and our population has quintupled. Many citizens have reached the level of elite special forces and Olympic champions, and the 1 in 100 superhumans possess even more staggering combat power. We have upgraded ancient martial arts, restored powerful industries, and unlocked brand new technologies. Dragon City's cavalry remains vigilant every night. Once the fog lifts, our steel torrent will sweep down like tigers from a mountain, spreading the radiance of Earth's civilization across this entire world. How could such a Dragon City be destroyed by mere otherworld creatures? And they're supposed to be brutal? Let me tell you, in this world, only we Earthlings are the most brutal." The iron-blooded instructor couldn't help but curse. The students were fired up, their blood boiling with excitement. Monitor Zhuohaoran stood up. He had sharp brows and bright eyes, a tall and straight figure, and lived up to his name with a natural aura of righteousness. He glanced at Meng Chao and said solemnly, "Teacher Yan, that was brilliantly said. The long night has passed, and ahead lies the dawn of victory. Growing up in such a radiant era, today's youth should study hard and cultivate diligently, striving to become superhumans and contributing their strength to the rise of Dragon City in this other world. How can we be terrified of the enemy like tigers and spend all day obsessing over the destruction of Dragon City? Of course, I believe those as timid as mice are ultimately a tiny minority. The majority of us share the same conviction. Dragon City will win. Earth will win. Civilization will win." Led by the monitor, the students grew ecstatic. Dragon City will win. Earth will win. Civilization will win. Everyone pumped their fists and shouted, wishing they could drop their pens right now to join the army and sweep across the other world. "The monitor is so handsome." Many girls cast admiring glances at Zhuohaoran. In sharp contrast, their looks toward Meng Chao naturally became strange. Some whispered in discussion, "Meng Chao really has fallen into a slump lately, always sleeping in class." You can't really blame him. His cultivation went wrong and he was seriously injured. Going from first in the class to the very bottom, who wouldn't feel dejected? Still, he shouldn't be cursing Dragon City to its doom. Holy crap, he's looking for trouble. Meng Chao narrowed his eyes, thinking to himself, "Do I have a grudge against you? Come to think of it, wait, I really do have a grudge." Monitor Zhuohaoran was exactly Meng Chao's archrival during high school. Staring at that handsome yet self-righteous pretty boy, Meng Chao's head throbbed as memory fragments came in waves. Scenes flashed quickly before his eyes. Meng Chao realized with a shock that in his nightmare just now, his failure in the high school graduation exam seemed to have something to do with the monitor. While Meng Chao failed the exam, the monitor got into a prestigious university and soon became a superhuman, soaring to greatness. But this spineless coward is a complete hypocrite and a true lowlife. When Dragon City was sweeping across the other world and winning every battle, Zhuohaoran rode the wave, gaining a halo of heroism, receiving heaps of flowers and glory. At high school class reunions, 7 or 8 girls would swarm him like wolves. Meng Chao was a man with a strong sense of justice. On the spot he was envious, no, disgusted to the core. However, when Dragon City encountered a real otherworld civilization and fell into a bitter struggle, this guy actually deserted, causing the entire front line to collapse. Sentenced by the military tribunal, Zhuohaoran decided to go all the way. He simply betrayed Dragon City, defected to the alien races, and sold out Earth's secrets. A traitor acting all high and mighty? Who's really terrified of the enemy like a tiger? At least I fought until the very last moment and perished with Dragon City. You little punk. First you sabotage my high school graduation exam, then you act like a lowlife at the class reunion, and finally you betray Dragon City? I'll make you wish you were dead. Like an instinct, combat plans swirled in Meng Chao's mind. He took half a step forward, and Zhuohaoran subconsciously tensed up in alarm. The monitor spoke so well. I am truly educated and deeply moved. Meng Chao said with a face full of humble bragging sincerity, even giving a slight bow. Thank you, Teacher Yen and Monitor, for your guidance. I have deeply realized my mistakes. I will change. From now on, I will stand firm and cultivate hard for the rise of Dragon City in the other world to contribute all my strength. Talk is cheap, watch my actions. Zhuohaoran shuddered. He felt Meng Chao's gaze had suddenly become eerie, a complete departure from the person he was before class. Enough, Monitor. Sit down. Let's continue the lesson. Teacher Yen didn't waste words and pointed Meng Chao to the corner. Be self-aware. Crouching dragon stance, Zhulong stake. Stay like that until class is over. The words crouching dragon stance triggered a chorus of gasps. In Dragon City's compulsory education system from kindergarten to high school, there are the 9 great stakes: 3 lying, 3 sitting, and 3 standing. Combined with breathing and meditation, they allow one to absorb spiritual energy, stimulate cell activity, break gene shackles, and step onto the path of transcendence. The crouching dragon stance, however, is the 10th stake technique beyond the syllabus and the hardest one to practice. Forget high school, even many vocational colleges don't teach it. Only the legendary undergraduate programs, sacred grounds for training superhumans, practice this stance. It requires the legs to be stretched extremely wide and the spine to twist like a venomous snake, brewing a half-exposed spirit. It's like a hungry, highly aggressive snake waking from hibernation. At number 9 middle school, even top students in the rocket class, who can stand for over 10 minutes, are rare, and their class 6 is just an ordinary parallel class. There's still half an hour until class ends. Everyone knew Meng Chao was injured in his junior year and hospitalized for months. Since his discharge, he had let himself go and never planned for undergraduate study. Even the basic 9 great stakes were mediocre for him. Standing in the crouching dragon stance for half an hour? He'd better prepare to crawl home after school. Many students felt a sense of shared sorrow, thinking Yen the devil was truly ruthless. Zhuohaoran crossed his arms and sat down with a cold sneer. Meng Chao obediently went to the corner to stand. The Zhulong stake seems like a very simple introductory stance. In my nightmare, it was phased out long ago. How exactly do you stand again? Meng Chao recalled, his mind still a bit muddled, unable to distinguish between dream and reality. A black sheep brings its own ruin. Zhuohaoran muttered to himself, his voice just loud enough to be heard by those around him. Before he could even finish, Meng Chao moved. Whoosh! Front leg bowed, back leg tensed. Both arms stretched out like spirit snakes. His spine resembled a flood dragon just awakening from the abyss, poised and ready for the spring thunder. Meng Chao's spirit erupted like a mountain torrent, beyond his own control. This? The students were dumbstruck. Meng Chao seemed reborn, a completely transformed person. The rhythm of his muscles, bones, and limbs radiated composure and absolute confidence. Simply standing there, he lacked even a hint of high school awkwardness. His posture wasn't standard, but it was more beautiful and lethal than any Zhulong stake they had seen. Even his fingertips trembled slightly, emitting a faint, flickering killing intent. Holy crap, is Meng Chao's Zhulong stake really this strong? He's arguably even better than the monitor. It's an illusion. He's putting his life on the line just to showboat. Just wait, 1 minute tops and he'll collapse. A minute passed. Meng Chao remained completely at ease, looking as though he could hold the stance until the late-night study session. Suddenly, as if struck by a thought, he spoke with a face full of humble bragging apology. Teacher Yen, is something wrong? Is my posture not standard enough? I'm so sorry. I haven't practiced in a while, and my movements are a bit off. I'll definitely fix it when I get home. Please bear with me. Yen Dongxing opened his mouth but stopped. His dark face went through a kaleidoscope of expressions before he returned to the podium in silence. The students, however, were screaming curses in their hearts. Is this beast Meng Chao even speaking a human language? If your Zhulong stake is off, then what are we? Earthworms? Was it an illusion? Everyone felt that since Meng Chao woke up, both his skill in the stake stance and his showboating ability had skyrocketed. All eyes and pressure shifted back to Zhuohaoran. The monitor felt as though Meng Chao had delivered a resounding slap to his face. His expression was awkward, but a flicker of ferocity flashed in the depths of his eyes. Class, continue class. Yan Dongxing knocked on the blackboard. 100 Battles Saber Technique and Thunder Cross Sword are the two most important cold weapon combat skills in high school. Last year's final big question on the high school graduation exam was about Thunder Cross Sword. This year, it's very likely the turn of the 100 Battles Saber Technique. Everyone, listen carefully to my analysis of the 7 advanced methods for the saber to cut through the gaps in monster carapaces. Yan Dongxing was a saber master and a gold medal teacher. It was said he had a senior brother who was a peerless expert on the high school graduation exam question-setting committee. For the past 3 years, Yan Dongxing had specifically taught senior year classes, and his rate of predicting exam questions was very high. Seeing the teacher reveal his special skills, everyone's spirits rose, and they forgot about Meng Chao. While standing in the crouching dragon stance, Zhilong stake, the lightning-like flame deep within Meng Chao's pupils grew brighter and brighter, releasing a slight sting. What on earth is this again? Meng Chao was astonished. A bundle of fire-like and electricity-like red spots of light floated in the upper left of his field of vision, as elusive as eye floaters. Others probably couldn't see it. Otherwise, a cluster of strange fire drifting around the classroom would have made everyone scream long ago. Moreover, it looked somewhat familiar. At the end of his nightmare, when Dragon City was being destroyed, he seemed to have seen this cluster of strange fire erupting from the city core. Now the strange fire accompanied Meng Chao back to his youth, then shattered into rows of mysterious and complex runes. Hundreds of runes jumped frantically, changing from worm-like odd characters to even odder ones, sounding like information from above the stars and deep space. After dozens of shifts, the information was translated into human language. Host has passed the mental and willpower check. Binding complete. The Seed of Hope. Host identity confirmed. The Hope-Bearer, Meng Chao, congratulations on becoming a Hope-Bearer of civilization. We hope you will do your best to spread the fire of civilization. Initial contribution point reward, 10,000. Detected. Old hidden injuries in the Hope-Bearer's body. Not proficient in any basic skills. Automatically allocate initial contribution points to restore to optimal state. The Seed of Hope? Hope-Bearer? Making contributions? Contribution rewards? A Rebirth gift pack? Meng Chao was completely bewildered, but he subconsciously nodded. Yes. Consuming 1,000 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. Healing progress, 10%. Consuming 1,010 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. Healing progress, 19%. Consuming 1,025 contribution points. Redeeming basic restoration once. A series of messages flashed through Meng Chao's vision. Simultaneously, a wave of warmth flooded his body like a trickling stream, as gentle as the first buds of spring. My injuries. The hidden wounds from last year's cultivation error that even doctors were helpless against, they're actually healing. I can feel it. Those shattered tendons and meridians are all being reconnected. Meng Chao's eyes widened, so euphoric he wanted to burst into song. This feels amazing. Don't stop. Soon after the string of restoration alerts, a brand new message popped up. Consuming 3,500 contribution points. Redeeming the basic force exertion technique Mighty Bull technique, and upgrading to expert level. This is... Endless details of the Mighty Bull technique flooded Meng Chao's mind. Every muscle contortion, vascular twist, and the flow of neural currents through every acupuncture point. Complex formulas for bone strength and ergonomics, along with scientific cultivation methods, became clear. Flashbacks of him training in his nightmare turned into a torrent of information, surging into his motor nerves and brain cells to make him an instant expert. With a single thought, he could control every muscle to unleash a punch of supreme power. Amazing! Are legendary third-rate experts really this strong? Just as he reached a peak of euphoria, the sensation stopped abruptly. Don't stop now. I was just getting into it. Keep going. Seed of Hope. Information flashed before his eyes. Basic skills are divided into 5 ranks: ordinary, expert, master, perfect, and ultimate. Upgrade occurs at 100% proficiency, accumulated through combat or redeemed with contribution points. Upgrade me like crazy. Do I look like someone who fusses over a few points? Current balance, 3 contribution points. Unable to redeem. Please accumulate more points. What? 10,000 points gone just like that? Fine, upgrade me to master level first. Can I give you an IOU? Fine, Upgrade me to master level first. Can I give you an IOU? No. Then tell me how to earn more. The fire of civilization is eternal. The stronger the civilization, the stronger the hope-bearer. Please contribute to your civilization to unlock more power and missions. The starlight text vanished, reverting into a magnificent flame that ignored him entirely. Meng Chao messed around for a while but couldn't summon a manual or tutorial. Ring, ring, ring. Class dismissed. Teacher Yen cast a cold, expressionless glance at Meng Chao and left the classroom with his specimens. The students finally remembered Meng Chao was still standing as punishment. When they looked back, their mouths hung open in shock. Meng Chao actually lasted the whole time? A proper stance provides immense benefits for tempering one's spirit and will. At this moment, Meng Chao looked like a rusty sword that had been repolished, radiating a sharp, piercing aura. It was as if people were seeing him as he was before his injury in junior year. Facing the students' astonished gazes and whispers, Meng Chao looked utterly indifferent. The corners of his eyes and mouth twitched slightly. For some reason he was suddenly starving, so hungry his stomach felt scorched. He couldn't move a single step, and his vision was turning black. Oh no! Does the Seed of Hope require me to provide all the bioenergy needed for body repairs and skill awakening myself? Just as he was about to collapse, a great white bear came charging towards him. Meng Chao, how could you practice the crouching dragon stance to such a powerful level behind my back? The great white bear was a tigerback tank weighing over 200 pounds. His aggrieved expression and resentful voice gave everyone goosebumps. Meng Chao shuddered. This voice, which he wouldn't forget even if it were turned into ash, belonged to his high school best friend, Chu Feixiong. Who else could it be? Quick, Fatty Xiong. I forgot my wallet today. Treat me to a feast at the tuck shop, and I'll treat you twice in the next 2 days. No way. Buy one get two back? My appetite is already 3 times yours. Since when did you become so generous, Meng Chao? There must be a catch. Would I ever lie to you? We're brothers from different parents. True. The whole class heard you, so I doubt you'll dare to back out. Let's go. To the tuck shop, it's on me today. 5 minutes later, at a corner of the school tuck shop, the great white bear was crying like a 200-pound child. Meng Chao, for the love of God, be a human. You're an animal. You just ate 2 weeks' worth of my allowance in one breath. I'll fight you. He lunged at Meng Chao ferociously. Don't be like that. Meng Chao peeled his last chocolate bar and casually swung his arm. Mighty Bull technique, activate. The 200-pound great white bear was sent flying. The two stared at each other in total confusion. Just now, Chu Feixiong was dazed and dizzy. It was a hallucination. Meng Chao remained deadpan, swallowing the chocolate while looking at the shelves unsatisfied. The instant noodles today look quite fresh too. Great color, aroma and taste. Get lost. I don't even have a cent left. Hurry up, class is starting. The great white bear fled in panic. Meng Chao was about to give chase when he noticed a white-haired janitor near the trash can who had accidentally spilled a huge bag of trash all over the floor. Ma'am, let me help you. Meng Chao reached out and picked up all the trash. Suddenly his eye twitched as information popped up. Frowny face for helping others and promoting the integrity of Dragon City. Contribution points plus 0.001. For protecting the environment and promoting the sustainable development of Dragon City. Contribution points plus 0.001. Contribution points, is it really that simple? The information flashed and vanished, but Meng Chao stood frozen for a long time. Teaching building, stairwell. Meng Chao leans against the handrail, head tilted back at a 45-degree angle in a pensive pose. He gazes deeply at the girls in short skirts walking up the stairs, laughing and chatting. Their calves, round and smooth, tremble slightly beneath their knee-high white cotton socks. Are you looking for death? The great white bear Chu Feixiong yanks him from behind. If you really want to look, just pretend you're not interested and steal a few glances. How can you stare at them so fixedly? You're such a rogue. Fat bear, you don't understand. A layer of vicissitudes clouds Meng Chao's eyes as he laments with a hint of humble bragging. Only at this moment do I realize that the life we once took for granted is actually so beautiful, worth sacrificing everything to protect. Meng Chao, I truly admire you. Every time, your showboating is so fresh and refined. Chu Feixiong pulls him aside. Stop looking. If you want, I can lend you the latest study materials I downloaded. Let's talk. Did you really kill Demon Yen in your dream and bring Dragon City to its ruin? And what about me? Did I become a great general and fight until the final moment? This great white bear had harbored a dream since childhood, to become a majestic great general, commanding Dragon City's iron torrent to sweep across the other world. Of course, this was the dream of every Dragon City youth. What do you mean brought to its ruin? I only saw a few fragmented images. As for you. Meng Chao stared at his best friend's large face, searching the depths of his mind. Past life memories were like butterflies dancing in a storm, mottled and elusive. The feeling of a hangover resurfaced. He couldn't capture clear details. Just as he was about to give up, a bolt of lightning suddenly illuminated his mind. Accompanied by a piercing headache, he saw it. Deep within the clouds, Meng Chao saw gargantuan monsters unlike anything ever seen before, resembling slowly moving hills grinding toward Dragon City. He saw countless soldiers and citizens charging forward like a surging tide, only to collapse and be crushed like water hitting a giant rock. Meng Chao jolted awake from the nightmare again. Clutching his chest, he slowly sat down on the steps, drenched in cold sweat. Even the girls running past, playing and chasing each other, could not divert his gaze. Meng Chao hesitated. What could he say? Should he tell his best friend that in the nightmare he never made it into military school, let alone became a general, but was merely a grunt on the front lines? That the monster war was about to escalate, with larger, more numerous, and even more ferocious beasts emerging incessantly? That Dragon City would suffer heavy losses in this battle, including Chu Feixiong? That countless soldiers and citizens would be sacrificed, and numerous powerhouses would fall? That they had preordained a destructive end before even leaving the newbie village? Even his mom and dad. Meng Chao didn't dare think further. This wasn't the future. It was just a damned nightmare. To change everything, he had to start with the high school graduation exam. Meng Chao snapped back to reality. Fat Bear, remember? My dream was to get into an undergraduate program and become a transcendent, while yours was to enter military school and become a general. It was said that back in the Earth era, getting into an undergraduate program wasn't too difficult due to university expansion. But after Dragon City's traversal, faced with resource scarcity and various crises at the brink of survival, all citizens had to fulfill their duties. Youths also had to compress their education time to enter work and combat positions earlier. The ideal for ordinary citizens was to get into a 2-year vocational college for professional training and find a good job. As for undergraduate programs, they only train transcendents. No matter now or in the future, transcendents are the pillars of Dragon City's dominance in the other world, and hold an exalted status, receiving deep respect from all citizens. Whether in politics or the military, whether as powerful tycoons or superstar celebrities in the spotlight, 9 out of 10 are transcendents. To shatter the horrific images seen in his nightmare, Meng Chao must become a transcendent. The great white bear Chu Feixiong extended his fist towards Meng Chao. It wasn't once upon a time, it was just yesterday that we both said it. Since you, this big idiot, have really made up your mind to go for a final 50-day sprint before the high school graduation exam, your buddy will definitely help you. Meng Chao took a deep breath and also extended his fist, bumping it heavily against Chu Feixiong's. Enter military school, become a general. Get into an undergraduate program, become a transcendent. The two brothers strode back to the classroom. A next period was literature class, and the students were jubilant. Great! We finally have literature class next. Quick, quick, quick. I want to recite the Ballad of Mulan. I want to recite Moonlight over the Lotus Pond, and I want to analyze the creative background and deep meaning of a madman's diary. I can't wait. Literature teacher? Where is our dear literature teacher? The students wait expectantly. Unfortunately, they didn't see the teacher. Instead, they were met by the icy face of the monitor, Zhuahaoren. Teacher Huang is sick today. Zhuahaoren stood on the podium and said, "This class is changed to self-study. Everyone, line up quickly and follow me to the cultivation room." No way. Not this again. I want Teacher Huang. Give me back my literature class. The expected bad news triggered a burst of wailing. Dragon City is a lone force in a foreign land and implements an iron-blooded education system. From kindergarten to university, combat-focused physical education, cultivation classes, and fighting courses take up more than half of the schedule. Mathematics classes for calculating ballistics and sword trajectories, biology classes for studying monster structures, and physics and chemistry classes for refining crystals and otherworld minerals all carry significant weight. With limited time, literature classes, which cannot directly increase combat power, can only be repeatedly reduced. By now, High school students only have 2 literature classes a week. During the final sprint for the high school graduation exam, these 2 literature classes must give way to the main subjects. Thus, the literature teacher can only get sick, or ask for leave every few days, giving the class time to the gym teacher or leaving it for self-study. Rarity makes things precious. These days, high school students are breathless under the weight of heavy cultivation. Everyone loves literature class more than words can say. It's heard that back in their ancestral home, Earth, peers could have 10 or 20 literature classes a week, recite hundreds of ancient poems, do several sets of literature exam papers daily, and write compositions of 2,000 or 3,000 words. On the contrary, physical education was optional. Those were such happy days. You can hide a literature paper and secretly enjoy it in the intervals of cultivation. Complaints aside, high school seniors have the awareness required for their grade level. The students could only slowly and reluctantly stand up. Quick, quick, quick! Be nimble with your movements. Zhua Haoran stood with his hands behind his back, shouting with considerable authority. In this era, the monitor has great power and must assist the teacher with many management tasks. I really can't stand this kid's showboating. The great white bear curled his lip while lining up. Zhua Haoran is too shameless. His strength reached the standard of the rocket class long ago, yet he insists on staying in our ordinary class as the monitor. Do you know why? Why? Meng Chao asked. Returning from the nightmare, his memories were chaotic, and many things remained a blur. The school has a rule. Since being the monitor takes up a student's time and energy, the school provides a certain amount of cultivation resources as compensation. It's an unwritten rule. And Zhua Haoran's uncle happens to be the dean, the macaque, who naturally made sure everything was handled perfectly for his nephew. Chu Feixiong explained, his anger rising. That guy's family owns a massive corporation. They've got the dean's connections and no shortage of gene medicines or monster materials. Yet he still insists on staying in the ordinary class as the monitor just to snatch resources from poor kids like us. There's truly no justice. Meng Chao remembered now. After his injury in the 10th grade, Chu Feixiong's strength in the class was indeed second only to Zhua Haoran. If the dean hadn't opened the back door for him, Zhua Haoran would have definitely moved to the rocket class. In Class 6, the Great White Bear would have had a great chance of becoming the monitor, gaining more resources and a better hope of getting into military school. No wonder he was so frustrated. You two in the back, what are you whispering about? You're wasting everyone's time. The monitor Zhua Haoran shouted mercilessly after hearing them. Chu Feixiong's brows knitted as he prepared to step forward, and Meng Chao held him back. Cultivation first. We have plenty of time ahead. The cultivation center was a 15-story building with over 40 specialized rooms for cultivation, restoration, and medical treatment. Its scale was 5 times that of the teaching building. Air was filled with the heat of youth, making one's blood boil upon entry. Since this was a self-study period, it was managed by the monitor while the teachers were away. At Zhua Haoran's command, students rushed toward various cultivation equipment. The clanging of barbells, the low growls of exertion, the whistling of punches and whip kicks, and the heavy thuds against sandbags formed a passionate song of struggle. This scene was both familiar and strange. This scene made Meng Chao sigh. When humans discovered spirit energy, the super energy of the otherworld, they learned to introduce it into their bodies to strike cells and unlock genes. Ancient cultivation was thus given a whole new meaning. However, poor in literature, rich in martial arts, remained a universal truth. Children of elite families grew up on milk sourced from powerful mammalian monsters. As they grew, they consumed secret medicines daily, applied special ointments, and even bathed in monster blood. They had the support of gravity pods, medical pods, and neural stimulation pods, along with the guidance of senior experts and scientific cultivation plans. For these favored children, becoming a transcendent was practically a foregone conclusion. For a poor kid like Meng Chao, standing out was as difficult as reaching the heavens. Without sufficient resources, burying oneself in hard work was like running a marathon after 3 days of fasting. It was pure suicide. Strengthening through contributions sounds great, but earning only 0.001 contribution points each time I pick up trash means even contracting all the landfills in the city wouldn't be enough. I still have to cultivate tirelessly. Meng Chao threw himself onto the cultivation equipment after just 2 movements. He was gasping for air. He was still so hungry. His body, repaired by the seed of hope and awakened by the mighty bull technique, was like a fully reinforced main battle tank. It consumed dozens of times more fuel than an ordinary car. His big idiot best friend's 2 weeks' worth of living expenses had barely filled the smallest gap. How could he possibly withstand high-intensity cultivation? What a pity! Several girls sighed in their hearts as they watched Meng Chao slumped over the equipment, looking frail and weak. Having just seen him maintain the crouching dragon stance, they vaguely recalled his brilliance during his first 2 years of high school. They wondered if his outward easygoingness hid a deep-seated unwillingness to accept his fate. Meng Chao once had a chance to become a transcendent, but now he's destined to be just another face in the crowd, they thought, unable to help but feel a surge of sympathy. Meng Chao, if you're going to train, then take it seriously. If not, get lost and stop hogging the equipment. The monitor, Zhuhouran, barked, keeping a constant eye on him. This guy. The great white bear glared at the monitor, helped Meng Chao to a corner, and handed him a sports drink. Sit for a while and take it slow. I'm fine. Meng Chao shook his head, his sweat pouring like rain. Damn it, my physical condition is too poor. What have I been doing for the past year? The seed of hope can help me awaken skills, but it can't conjure power out of thin air. I need cultivation resources to fill my main battle tank with fuel. Meng Chao smiled bitterly. If he could have afforded resources, he wouldn't have spent a whole year in self-abandonment. You haven't trained for a year. You've probably even forgotten the basics of the mighty bull force, right? Chu Feixiong assumed Meng Chao was truly clueless and demonstrated the basic force exertion method with great vigor. Being a natural power type, his version of the mighty bull force was fierce and imposing. Meng Chao watched, his gaze revealing something peculiar. Chu Feixiong rubbed his head. Was it an illusion? He actually saw a hint of disdain in Meng Chao's eyes. Meng Chao, are you looking down on my training? The great white bear's face darkened. Force shouldn't be exerted that way. Meng Chao couldn't help but say. Chu Feixiong couldn't believe his ears. I treat you like a brother, and you're showboating to me? Don't misunderstand, I'm not targeting you, Meng Chao quickly explained. I'm saying that current force exertion methods are all garbage. Not exactly, but they are indeed a bit crude and not very scientific. This was beyond arrogant. The mighty bull force was a scientific force exertion method developed in year 35 of the new era by a research team led by the military expert, Zhou Mang. They had studied the physiological structures of over a dozen level 3 monsters, such as the hammer beast and the savage horned beast. It integrated force exertion models of Olympic champions and mixed martial artists from the Earth era, undergoing 5 years of R&D in ergonomics labs. Its characteristics were being easy to understand, quick to learn, and extremely explosive. Besides stimulating blood and strengthening the body, it also triggered a massive secretion of growth hormones in teenagers and improved cell activity, offering great benefits for advanced cultivation. After over a decade of practice, it, along with the Ripple Force and the Dragon Snake Force, was designated by the Dragon City Education Bureau as one of the 3 mandatory force exertion methods for compulsory education. Yet Meng Chao claimed this set of methods was crude and unscientific? Brother, I think you've become exceptionally shameless this afternoon. Little did he know, Meng Chao wasn't boasting at all. War is the best means of communication between civilizations. When future Dragon City residents and other world powerhouses collided, their civilizations deeply penetrated each other. Humans utilized the wisdom of the other world to constantly improve Earth-originated industry, technology, and martial arts. Today's mighty bull force is only the first version. In the future, through encounters with various bizarre otherworld creatures and deeper explorations of cells and genes through dissection, Dragon City's powerhouses will push the mighty bull force to its second, third, pro, and plus versions. The ultimate version of the mighty bull force not only increases the maximum output by 30%, but also fixes most of the bugs from previous versions where spirit energy would run wild in the blood vessels and neural networks. It shortens the muscle cooldown time after excessive expansion by 15%, greatly enhancing extreme punching power and combat endurance. By then, it is no longer just the mighty bull force, but the higher-level mighty bull technique. Through the seed of hope, Meng Chao lit up his past life memories and awakened none other than the future's ultimate mighty bull technique. Let's go, follow me to the bathroom. Meng Chao's eyes flickered. They went up 2 floors and found the most secluded bathroom. Seeing no one around, Meng Chao stealthily opened a stall and signaled his best friend to enter. Meng Chao, what are you doing? The great white bear asked nervously. Don't be scared, take off your shirt and let me study your muscles. Meng Chao pulled and dragged his big idiot friend into the stall. Before the great white bear could scream, Meng Chao cut him off. Just now, when you were circulating the mighty bull force to your ribs, did you feel a faint, aching bloat? Like power was about to leak out. Chu Feixiong froze, clutching his ribs with a grim expression. Also, analyzing your footprints, your lower body is unstable. But I've observed your leg muscles and tendons. There shouldn't be a major problem, Meng Chao pondered. When you kick off the ground, do you first feel a needle-like sting in your soles, and half a second later, it moves to your knees? Chu Feixiong was shocked. How did you know? Meng Chao smiled. You haven't mastered the essence of the mighty bull force at all. At most, you're exerting 50% of your power. The remaining half has nowhere to go and runs rampant in your body, rebounding against your legs and soles, putting extra pressure on your knees and ankles. If you keep training blindly like this, at best you won't exert full power. At worst, you'll suffer from osteoporosis, joint aging, and long-term excessive cardiovascular pressure. This isn't cultivation, it's seeking death. Ignoring the toilet behind him, he looked quite like an otherworldly Master. Chu Feixiong was stunned, and obediently let Meng Chao study his height, weight, limb length, body fat percentage, and muscle distribution. Meng Chao closed his eyes to calculate for a moment, and a series of future power exertion formulas surfaced in his mind. Opening his eyes again, brilliant light radiated from them. He held a sharpened pencil lead between his fingers. Come on, try exerting power again. As Chu Feixiong circulated the mighty bull force, his muscles expanded, and his blood vessels protruded. Meng Chao suddenly poked him with the pencil tip. Chu Feixiong was about to cry out in pain, but instead felt a numb, electric sensation. A miraculous power was fine-tuning every strand of his muscles, every blood vessel, and every nerve bundle. The originally scattered brute force was now gathered together. What technique is this? Soon, the great white bear's expression changed from suspicion to pleasant surprise. Exerting power is so much smoother. Nothing hurts anymore, and it even feels like my strength has increased. This is all due to your years of hard practice. I'm just helping you find the trick to release your power completely. Meng Chao's pencil tip moved like a flying needle, becoming increasingly fluid. He poked him 300 to 500 times before finally coming to a stop. Meng Chao shook his sore wrist. Try a punch. The great white bear Chu Feixiong gathered all his strength. The sting from the pencil tip on his acupuncture points guided him into a slightly different posture. His muscles tightened to the limit. He seemed to shrink a size, but became sturdier, like high-density granite. A punch blasted out. Faint ripples appeared in the air, creating a sound like tearing cloth as it broke the air. Hiss! Chu Feixiong was startled by the sheer exhilaration of the strike. He had never thrown such a satisfying punch. It was like a mountain torrent, unstoppable. Though untested, he was certain this punch increased his limit by at least 3%. Increasing punch power by 3% with just a few minutes of adjustment. Meng Chao's methods could no longer be described as merely monstrous. Chu Feixiong's face was full of shock while he threw the punch. The fire at the corner of Meng Chao's eye, the seed of hope, glowed magnificently again. Sparks transformed into lines of text. Mentoring ordinary citizen Chu Feixiong in the basic skill, Mighty Bull technique. Learning progress, 10%. An ordinary citizen has grown stronger. The overall combat power of Dragon City has increased. Congratulations, your civilization has become more powerful. Contribution points plus 10. Meng Chao was surprised and delighted. The implications were profound. This means I don't have to pick up trash? As long as I teach future martial arts to current Dragon City citizens, it counts as a contribution to civilization. It made sense. A civilization's strength didn't rely on a single hero fighting alone. No matter how strong he became, he couldn't solo every monster and otherworld god or demon. But if he could become a gold medal mentor, even more capable than Demon Yen, and teach future martial arts to all citizens, making everyone 100 times stronger than in his nightmare, wouldn't they beat the crap out of those otherworld entities? So, this is the true meaning of contribution points. The stronger the civilization, the stronger I become. Thinking of this, the fire before his eyes shifted. Congratulations to the Hope Bearer for contributing more than 1 point to civilization. Please choose your first contribution reward. Option 1. Upgrade Mighty Bull Technique from Expert to Master. Option 2. Awaken a new skill. Basic Marksmanship, or Ripple Technique. Detailed costs followed. Upgrading Mighty Bull Technique required 756 points. Awakening Basic Marksmanship required 3,100 points. Awakening Ripple Technique required 1,500 points. They are both part of the 3 basic force exertion methods. Why is there such a huge price difference between Mighty Bull Technique and Ripple Technique? Meng Chao remembered awakening the Mighty Bull Technique had cost him 3,500 points. Thinking carefully, the Mighty Bull Technique was a fierce, rigid style he hadn't practiced much since his injury. The Ripple Technique, however, was flexible and long-lasting, excellent for rehabilitation. Over the past year, while other cultivation had stalled, he had persisted with the Ripple Technique. Is it cheaper because I already know a bit of the Ripple Technique? Meng Chao mused. One was rigid, the other flexible. One an upgrade, one an awakening. Which to choose? He nodded and selected basic marksmanship. Was he kidding? Since it was a free gift, of course he'd pick the most expensive one. The rapid staccato of gunfire echoed in his mind, like a howling bullet storm. With a single thought, countless firearm structures and shooting essentials surfaced past life, memories, flashed before him like crystalline shards. He saw himself firing incessantly at all kinds of otherworld creatures, firing and firing. Some of these creatures looked as if an octopus had been forcefully stuffed into the belly of a roasted chicken, 100 times uglier than current monsters. In that instant, Meng Chao seemed to blast hundreds upon thousands of such monsters to pieces. His marksmanship experience skyrocketed, and a numb electric pleasure surged into every nerve ending, making him groan with pure bliss. Fat bear, don't worry. I will definitely make sure you get into military school, Meng Chao promised. Seeing him with his eyes closed, a face full of intoxication and making strange noises, Chu Feixiong couldn't help but shudder. The big idiot, a student weighing over 200 pounds, shrank into the corner. Chu Feixiong looked at him as if he were a monster, feeling a hair-raising chill down his spine.
Trotting all the way back to the cultivation room, the great white bear Chu Feixiong reached the punch force tester in 2 steps and impatiently started the device. The massive and precise crystal machinery emitted a creaking sound as it hummed to life, and the display screen lit up. Chu Feixiong howled and beat his chest like a gorilla. Following the force exertion skills Meng Chao had taught him, he struck the opening stance of the Mighty Bull Technique. Just as he was about to exert force, someone unexpectedly blocked his path. It was Zhua Haoran. What's the matter? The great white bear asked stiffly, his entire body uncomfortably tense with built-up power. Who gave you permission to touch the punch force tester? Monitor Zhua Haoran said with a stern face. Even though it's a self-study period, you still have to follow class discipline. Everyone is cultivating seriously, but what about you and Meng Chao? You slipped out as soon as class started, and only returned 20 minutes later. Now you just decide on your own to test your punch force. Did you get permission? His voice was neither too loud nor too soft, just enough for the entire cultivation room to hear. The great white bear's eyebrows shot up in anger. Don't be angry, classmate Chu Feixiong. I'm doing this for your own good, Zhua Haoran said, glancing at Meng Chao. After all, you are different from certain people. You still have a high hope of getting into an undergraduate program. With only a month and a half left, focus on your final sprint. Stop hanging around with certain people, lest you ruin your future and find it too late for regrets. All right, go cultivate first. 10 minutes before class ends, I will organize everyone to line up for the punch test. The monitor waved his hand dismissively. With such a self-righteous attitude, the great white bear flew into a rage. Monitor Zhua, do you really think you're a teacher? Stop overstepping your authority. Chu Feixiong shouted. I just had an epiphany regarding the Mighty Bull Force. That's why I'm in a hurry to test my strength. Even the homeroom teacher or Demon Yen wouldn't stop me. Why are you meddling? If you waste my epiphany, can you afford the cost? His naturally loud voice immediately drew the attention of the classmates. Everyone perked up their ears, curious as to why the 2 top experts of the class were in an open conflict. Zhua Haoran's face darkened. He hadn't expected Chu Feixiong to dare act out like this in public. This was throwing his kindness back in his face. An epiphany? Zhua Haoran sneered. Classmate Chu Feixiong, I saw your stance. It was crooked and bizarre, far from the standard Mighty Bull force. Exerting force like that won't produce a heavy punch. What kind of epiphany is that? I'm in charge of this self-study period. Your Mighty Bull force is so clumsy. It's one thing if you can't throw a heavy punch, but if your power goes astray and causes an injury that ruins your high school graduation exam, I truly wouldn't be able to pay for that. If you really want to use the punch force tester, go to the side and figure out the mighty bull force properly before you come back. My mighty bull force has a problem? Chu Feixiong laughed in extreme anger. Meng Chao stepped forward, blocking the path of the enraged great white bear. Since the monitor feels Chu Feixiong's exertion isn't standard enough, why don't you demonstrate the standard mighty bull force for us to study diligently, all right? He had a smile on his face, looking seemingly sincere. Zhua Haoran snorted coldly. Being able to serve as the monitor, he naturally possessed the strength to suppress the entire class. Look closely, this is the real mighty bull force. A cold glint flashed in the monitor's eyes. He struck a nearly perfect stance, twisted his hips, and threw a punch like a bolt of lightning. Bang! The punch force tester shook violently. The numbers on the display skipped frantically before settling. 225 kilograms. Isn't that Zhua Haoran's own class record? Last time, he had to charge up for a long time to hit that. Now he matched his record with just a casual punch. His power is becoming more and more terrifying. Over the past month or two, the monitor's improvement has been so fast. His limit punch force has surpassed the heavyweight boxing kings of the Earth era. Getting into a prestigious university is now a sure thing. I remember the great white bear's limit was 220 kilograms. The monitor's physique is a size smaller than his, yet his punch force exceeds it by 5 kilograms. The eye-catching data caused the onlookers to whisper in low voices. The girls were drawn to Zhua Haoran's handsome posture, some even blushing slightly. Everyone was forced to agree with the monitor's view. This was the standard mighty bull force, the only way to throw a truly heavy punch. Zhua Haoran pulled back his fist. He stared directly at Chu Feixiong, while glancing at Meng Chao out of the corner of his eye. Did both of you see that clearly? His expression was indifferent, leaving no room for rebuttal. A few classmates who were close with the great white bear, fearing he would suffer in a conflict, whispered from behind, "Bear, forget it. Let's just test together later. Meng Chao, come and help talk him down, don't just stand there like an big idiot." Before the words could even settle, Meng Chao stepped back half a step, and the great white bear strode forward. "You!" Zhua Haoran's face darkened. He didn't yield an inch as the two collided head-on. Mighty bull force against mighty bull technique. Bang! It was as if an angry bull and a furious rhinoceros had crashed into each other. Many students couldn't bear to watch, already imagining the great white bear being sent flying, ending up in a pathetic belly-up heap. They were wrong. The one who retreated 7 or 8 steps and collapsed onto the ground, his fair face turning blue and purple, was actually Zhua Haoran, who had just been showboating. And it wasn't over yet. The great white bear took advantage of the momentum and charged forward. The friction between his sneakers and the floor emitted a scream, releasing the scent of burning rubber. Every inch of his muscle looked like red-hot steel, and his fists were like ignited dynamite. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed as the punch hit the bullseye, far louder than Zhua Haoran's earlier strike. The punch force tester even jumped up. The numbers on the display skipped wildly, taking a long time to settle. 232 kilograms. He surpassed the monitor. It's a new class record. The students were dumbstruck. Even the great white bear Chu Feixiong couldn't believe it. He looked at his own fist, then turned back to look at Meng Chao, his face filled with shock that was beyond words. In the deathly silent cultivation room, Meng Chao was the first to jump up and shout at the top of his lungs. "Fatty Xiong, you're so despicable! How dare you secretly cultivate such a powerful, super mighty bull force behind my back? You've completely suppressed the monitor." The students looked at each other in confusion. Super mighty bull force? You guys don't know? Meng Chao looked around and said in shock. Many powerhouses in society and the military are constantly improving the mighty bull force, developing many powerful upgraded versions that are far superior to our high school version. Chu Feixiong must be using an upgraded version. Otherwise, there's no reason he would crush the monitor like this, right? In reality, their limit punch force only differed by a few kilograms, hardly worlds apart. Zhua Haoran was fast and skilled in leg techniques. In actual combat, he would still have the upper hand. Meng Chao's claims of suppressing and crushing were gross exaggerations. However, Zhua Haoran had been caught off guard and hit so hard he nearly lost his breath. He couldn't speak for the moment and could only let Meng Chao drag his name through the mud, so infuriated that he couldn't even stand up. The students followed Meng Chao's logic and nodded subconsciously. Many military powerhouses and research institutes are constantly exploring upgraded versions, different from the common school versions. Everyone envied Chu Feixiong. Learning such a method right before the high school graduation exam was like adding wings to a tiger. Fatty Xiong, you're ruthless. Meng Chao gave his bewildered best friend a thumbs up. I heard some high-end classes charge hundreds of thousands in tuition. You actually spent that much? Then again, during the final battle of the high school graduation exam, every point can change your destiny. This was well worth it. It's a pity I don't have the connections. Otherwise, I'd sell everything I own just to learn the super mighty bull force. Meng Chao slapped his thigh, his face full of regret, leaving the students deep in thought. Wait. Meng Chao's eyes suddenly lit up as he sized up his friend. Big idiot. No, Brother Xiong, how about you teach me the super mighty bull force? Chu Feixiong was dazed. What on earth? Didn't you just teach me this in the bathroom? Don't be so quick to refuse. I know that with the high school graduation exam approaching, everyone is racing against the clock. We are classmates, but also competitors for the exam. There's no reason for you to teach for free. I can pay tuition. Chu Feixiong started to speak, but Meng Chao jumped in. Talking about money between schoolmates is just too vulgar. How about this? We settle using cultivation resources, gene medicines, high-energy nutrient solutions, cell fortifiers, or monster materials. Whatever you want, just say the word. Business is business, even between brothers. Chu Feixiong wasn't a big idiot. He finally realized that Meng Chao was trying to make a profit and had to help him act out this show. He looked conflicted and slightly hesitant. Brother Xiong, save the children. Meng Chao said with eyes filled with fake tears. Chu Feixiong looked very reluctant. Teaching you one wouldn't be a problem. Let's go to the corner and talk. Let's go. Meng Chao was ecstatic. Wait. The classmates' ears were practically burning from listening, and someone finally couldn't hold back. They had been stuck at a plateau for months, their limit punch force refusing to increase, leaving them unable to sleep at night. Seeing Chu Feixiong's stunning punch and having Meng Chao's transformation as a precedent, how could they miss this godsend opportunity? Most students who could get into a district key school had decent families, and to squeeze out a few extra points for the high school graduation exam, they didn't mind spending some cultivation resources. In an instant, the students crowded around. Brother Xiong, you can't just teach Meng Chao. We're classmates too. I'm also a child, save me as well. Brother Xiong, everyone knows you're the most loyal. Help me out, please. And me. Besides the cultivation resources, I'll even bring you breakfast for a month, all right? Brother Xiong, Boss Xiong, we're all brothers, save the children. Everyone was desperately flattering him, completely forgetting that the monitor was still sitting on the floor. Zhua Haoran grit his teeth, his handsome face completely distorted. Driving one sheep is no different from driving a whole flock. How about we start a study group? Everyone can chip in some cultivation resources to subsidize you, and you can show some spirit by making a contribution to the class collective. Meng Chao thoughtfully offered a suggestion. That's a great idea. The Super Mighty Bull Technique Study Group, I'm in. The students chimed in one after another, and at this point, Chu Feixiong could only nod. Right then, a message popped up in the corner of Meng Chao's vision. Your proposal has promoted class harmony. The students' motivation to learn has significantly increased, making it more likely they will achieve high scores and contribute more to civilization in the near future. Contribution points plus 11. Classmate Chu Feixiong is truly principled. Meng Chao couldn't help but sigh. With the high school graduation exam so close, he's still willing to spend time and energy helping everyone progress together. What a good person. Tell me, with such a selfless soul and such great strength, why didn't the teacher choose him as monitor in the first place? The class fell into an awkward silence for a moment before people started to laugh awkwardly. Zhua Haoran, who had just climbed back up, was so infuriated that he saw stars and nearly collapsed again. Regarding the price for learning the Mighty Bull technique, Meng Chao went with a high-volume, low-margin strategy, practically giving it away. Everyone recognized the value. Before school ended, more than half the class had joined the study group. Some well-off students brought various cultivation resources early. Over a dozen gene medicines, high-energy nutrients, bone cell growth factor. They were all high-end brands that Meng Chao couldn't afford even if he sold everything he owned. Meng Chao took Chu Feixiong to the rooftop to split the loot and taught him some of the mighty bull technique's force exertion formulas and acupuncture point stimulation methods, so he could start leading the class in practice. Chu Feixiong agreed to host the study group for Meng Chao, but firmly refused to take any of the cultivation resources. The Great White Bear said his family was slightly better off than Meng Chao's, so his basic resources were guaranteed. Since Meng Chao wanted to sprint for the undergraduate program, he had to cherish every hard-won drop of resources. After much persuasion, Meng Chao forced a third of the loot into his best friend's backpack. The Great White Bear asked again about the origin of the super mighty bull force. Meng Chao thought for a bit and blamed everything on the dark web. "Are you still browsing those underground life science forums?" The Great White Bear was shocked. "Those places are full of cultivation maniacs and mad scientists. They release seemingly powerful secret methods for free, but it's rarely out of kindness. It's more likely they want users to be lab rats to help them test their data. Last year, when you were hospitalized with injuries, wasn't that because you learned a beta test technique from those underground forums? Haven't you suffered enough from that?" Meng Chao could only say he was very careful this time, having mulled over it for months to ensure there were no issues before sharing it with everyone. "You know my family's situation. If I don't take a risk, how can I compete with rich second-generation kids like Swahaoran, and how can I protect my family from those ferocious monsters?" Meng Chao pondered. "But your concerns make sense. How about this? Help me explain clearly to everyone that the super mighty bull force is a test version and might have plenty of bugs. Anyone who feels it's dangerous can have their cultivation resources refunded. Originally, I priced it so low just to make a contribution. If they don't want to learn, why would I force them?" After his best friend left, Meng Chao leaned against the rooftop railing alone, watching the sunset. The star of the other world was larger and more vivid than Earth's sun. Clouds steamed and surged as the sky and city turned into an ocean of red. Standing in the center of this red sea was a towering spire, crafted from alloys infused with rare metals from the other world. Its ductility and pressure resistance were greatly enhanced, allowing the tower to break the limits of skyscrapers from the Earth era, piercing the heavens as if leading directly to the universe. Countless shimmering dots of light circled the tower, flying in and out like a swarm of bees. Those were the Transcendents. This magnificent building, standing out from the crowd, was called the Transcendent Tower, the headquarters of the Transcendent Association. Surrounding the Transcendent Tower were buildings resembling a combination of pyramids and fortresses, lined up closely and as sturdy as gravity dams, capable of withstanding the impact of the strongest monsters. Between the skyscrapers, countless tiny black dots scaled walls and leaped across roofs, ordinary citizens just finishing work. In this era of Dragon City, private cars and taxis were rare due to resource scarcity and tight space. Ordinary citizens possessed abundant physical strength and agile movement. Running long distances was hardly slower than transferring between buses. Some wore maneuver gear manufactured using biomimetic principles to simulate monster limbs. Wearing them provided great elasticity and jet propulsion. A light leap could cover 10 to 20 meters, making speeds of 40 to 50 kilometers per hour child's play. In the distance, domesticated giant sandworms arched and churned, swallowing and spitting rocks like shield tunneling machines to construct the 12th subway line. Further away at the city's edge, mist loomed like a gray wall that blotted out the sun, completely sealing off the outside world. Previously, Meng Chao disliked the mist, feeling it sealed Dragon City and prevented Earthlings from expanding and dominating the other world. He also disliked the city before him. The buildings were too dense, the streets too crowded, and the cultivation pressure too great. Without seeing real mountains or the ocean, he always felt stifled. Like all teenagers, he had secretly watched too many books and movies about Earth. His dreams were filled with that world of blue skies, white clouds, fresh air and peaceful beauty. A world where people were carefree. Everything on Earth. The high mountains, oceans, farmlands, and great rivers. High school students there only had to take 2 PE classes a week, but dozens of literature and mathematics classes. Adults only worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, yet they could earn big money, live in large houses, and go on frequent vacations. They ate pure, green, non-polluted, and non-GMO delicacies. It was as beautiful as paradise. It wasn't until he saw the real otherworld in his nightmare after the mist cleared, seeing the Transcendent Tower and the entire city vanish into ash during the burst of meteor fire, that Meng Chao realized how precious everything before him truly was. His eyes grew hot without him noticing. Earth was a homeland he could never return to, and the nightmare was a tomorrow that hadn't yet arrived. The city before him was his only home. Facing an unclear future and the upcoming crisis, he felt nervous, excited, and impulsive, but also somewhat lost. Right then, the Mighty Bull technique is spreading among ordinary citizens. Dragon City's overall combat power has increased. Contribution points +1, +3, +2. The strange fire flickered before his eyes, and a string of contribution points made him both surprised and delighted. It's the Great White Bear. He's currently leading the study group. It seems that even if I'm not mentoring them personally and the technique is spread indirectly, I still get credit as a contribution. Although the contribution points are much lower than from personal mentoring, many grains of sand make a tower. As more citizens grow stronger, I will also continue to grow stronger. We will definitely survive in the other world, in an instant. Meng Chao felt his waist was no longer sore and his legs no longer ached. His memory became clearer, and his vision and hearing had a slight improvement. Even the bright red school badge on his chest seemed to become more vibrant. His contribution points rose to 39. Making a contribution feels great. Meng Chao thought happily. At this time, the roar of propellers echoed from the sky. Dozens of armored airships tore through the clouds like a majestic fleet, cutting through the waves and diving down. Lacking aviation fuel and with crystal engines being too heavy, combined with Dragon City being enveloped in mist, their cruising altitude and range were quite limited. Supersonic fighters and such had long been stored away in underground armories. Now, Dragon City's aerial force primarily consisted of clumsy, slow, but fiercely armed armored airships. Crystals were pulverized and spirit energy surged wildly, driving 3 rows of 6 propellers to rotate at high speeds. The massive amount of spirit chi released was used to fill the giant gas bags to maintain the buoyancy of these behemoths. There was also spirit chi leaking from the gaps in the gas bags, making a hissing whistle. This made the armored airships look like iron gods and demons riding the clouds. The armored airships lowered loudspeakers and announced to the entire city. Attention all citizens, latest news from the Municipal Meteorological Bureau. A mist attack is coming tonight, and monsters will break into the urban area. The primary areas for monster appearances are predicted to be near the North City Steel Plant. The Survival Committee has issued Order Number 93 of the 55th year of the new era, ordering the Dragon Steel Group to enter Level 1 combat readiness immediately. Jusha and Jiangbin districts will enter Level 2 readiness, while other areas will enter Level 3 readiness. All citizens, please strictly follow the regulations, stay alert, and prepare to face the enemy. Always remember, we are Earth's expeditionary force. Earth is with us, and Dragon City will be victorious. The weather forecast was an order. Instantly, whether inside or outside the campus or on the streets, the pace of students, workers, and white-collar professionals quickened by a notch. A monster siege tonight? Meng Chao's heart tightened. He hurriedly swung his backpack onto his back. Taking 3 steps at once, he spiraled downstairs like a whirlwind. He left the school gate and rushed to the bus station. With monsters approaching, the city's operational efficiency improved significantly. The bus soon arrived. Buses in this era were also driven by spirit energy, carrying a huge crystal engine like a hunchback. It was also called the Turtle Bus. It whooshed out spirit chi like an ancient steam train entering a station. The fuel for the bus was the lowest grade inferior crystal. Being full of impurities and having an insufficient reaction, the spirit chi sprayed out had a garlic smell and was somewhat irritating to the eyes. Meng Chao rubbed his eyes and impatiently squeezed onto the bus. Tianfu Garden was a common public housing estate found everywhere in the old city. After 30 years of the Monster War, a large number of buildings that had traversed from Earth were destroyed. The Survival Committee built a vast amount of indestructible new residences modeled after war fortresses. Defensive capability was the most important priority, with comfort being a secondary consideration. The main unit type in Tianfu Garden consisted of 2-bedroom apartments of 60 square meters. It sounded decent enough, but residential and office buildings these days had to reserve significant space for machine guns, anti-aircraft gun positions, and shelters. The walls were 3 times as thick as in the past, and every single wall was a load-bearing wall. Therefore, the shared area was more than twice that of the Earth era, leaving a practical area of at most 30 square meters. Each room was as small as a sparrow's cage. To meet the needs of defending the city and exploring the other world, the Survival Committee encouraged childbirth. While the population exploded, the facilities aged and illegal structures appeared, making the environment even more harsh. Sewage flowed everywhere, and the air was filled with stench. Dilapidated pipes leaked, and spirit energy hissed like 100 sirens. Residents couldn't afford top-grade crystals for household fuel and used cheap ones on par with those for buses. There were too many impurities and the smell was too strong. The entire community was immersed in colorful spirit energy all day long, like a street of barbecue stalls. Adding to that, the armor on the exterior walls was mottled and corroded by monster acid, appearing messy and grotesque. The residents here wanted to leave Tianfu Garden at all times. When adults were idle, they loved to scold their children. Why aren't you cultivating properly? All you do is recite Tang and song poetry all day. What's the use of that stuff? When will you pass the high school graduation exam, get into an undergraduate program, and become a transcendent? If we could live in a 120 square meter commercial housing estate, our ancestral graves on Earth would surely smoke with pride. Standing at the entrance of the wet market beside the community, Meng Chao had no complaints, only warm memories. Finally, I'm home. He heard the kind and familiar voices from the market. River snails, fresh river snails just caught from the river. Look, they still bite. Fresh mighty bull demonic boar liver. Give it to your kids so they get 100 on every exam and can kill monsters with every punch. Uncle, won't you take a piece? Jade fruits, newly cultivated from the genetic farm. Tastier than peaches on Earth. Juicy and sweet with every bite. If it's not ripe or sweet, you don't pay. The hustle and bustle was full of life. Meng Chao smiled. He greedily inhaled the aroma drifting from the cooked food stalls, walked through the market, and entered Tianfu Garden. Brother. Meng Chao rounded the small square, and someone suddenly called him. Looking back, a little girl in a junior high school uniform was dragging a large, heavy iron bucket, like a hard-working little ant dragging food several times its size. The little girl was cute, like a budding flower. Her eyes were curved with a hint of mischief. The uniform was one size too large, making her look even more delicate. She waved while hopping. Come help me. I'm exhausted. Oh. Meng Chao walked toward his sister, Bai Jiaocao, feeling a bit dazed. Looking at that pretty little face that hadn't yet fully matured, his brain throbbed again. It felt as if a red-hot steel needle was piercing through his temple and into the deepest part of his mind, releasing crystalline shards of memory. Her beautiful long black hair turned into flaming purple hair, and her jewel-like black eyes shone with a seductive light. She bore a pair of wide bloodshot wings, like a demon descending from the depths of the blood hell abyss. A mysterious and evil smile played on the corners of her mouth. Her heavy, colorful beauty was enough to make the hearts of half the creatures in the other world burst with terror. This was the Night Witch. Wherever she went, she brought the eternal night of endless darkness. Brother. Heh heh. Meng Chao seemed to see his sister far into the future, the girl who would become the Night Witch, treading him under her feet while sneering mysteriously. Brother. What's up? A small hand waved in front of his eyes. Bai Jiaocao looked at him oddly. You look like a mouse who just saw a cat. Meng Chao, meow meow meow. He never expected her to be this kind of sister. His eyes flickered with a strange light. Brother, what are you doing? Bai Jiaocao felt a chill down her spine. Let me ask you something, Meng Chao said weirdly. Do you have any dissatisfaction with me? How could I, brother? What could I possibly be dissatisfied with? Nonsense, of course I'm dissatisfied, you bad brother. Do I treat you poorly or bully you often? No way, brother is the best to me. You never bully me. Of course you're not good. You bully me every day. You're the great demon king. You really have the nerve to ask such a question. I'm saying if, one day you gain great power, would you tread me under your feet? Oh my God, my dear elder brother, what on earth are you thinking? How could I tread you under my feet? Am I that brutal? Hee, you guessed right. If this lady gets power, the first thing I'll do is tread you, this bad brother, under my feet. Stomp hard, stomp stomp stomp, oh ho ho ho. Bai Jiaocao tried her best to control her facial expression, but the thought of flipping the script and standing triumphantly over her tyrannical big brother was uncontrollable. Meng Chao narrowed his eyes and suddenly reached out his devil's claws, covering his sister's head and rubbing it vigorously. Brother, what did I do to provoke you? Bullying me again? Bai Jiao was both angry and flustered, her small face flushed red. Does a brother need a reason to bully his sister? Meng Chao felt a surge of satisfaction. He thought to himself, who told you to stomp on me so hard after you became the Night Witch? While I can still beat you, I'll enjoy myself first. Since he had returned from the nightmare, he would never allow even a sliver of misfortune to befall his family again. Little sister, I won't let you become the terrifying Night Witch. You should be the happiest, most beautiful and most beloved little princess in the entire city. No, the entire other world. As he thought this, he messed up the little princess's hair even more. Brother, I hate you. Well, I just love the way you hate me but can't get rid of me. Tianfu Garden. Building 19. Unit 3. Due to power shortages and monster invasions, buildings in this era rarely had elevators installed. Adults were used to climbing the walls like geckos and entering their homes directly through the windows. Teenagers, however, found climbing the stairs to be no effort at all. Meng Chao and Bai Jiao pushed and pulled the heavy iron bucket of iron-armored rhino beef until they reached the door of Unit 704. Nailed to the paint-peeling alloy door was a 5 Good Family plaque. Beneath the plaque, 65 deformed horned skulls were spray-painted, each marked with a red cross, representing the 65 monsters this family had slain. This scene, both familiar and strange, made Meng Chao's nose sting with emotion. In his nightmare, 20 years of a plain yet happy life for this family of 4 had come to a sudden halt amidst the chaos. Having returned from that nightmare, Meng Chao was determined to guard everything forever. Mom, I'm home. Even though he had the keys in his pocket, Meng Chao couldn't help but shout. The cramped but tidy room was as stifling as a steamer. In the open kitchen squeezed next to the small living room, Bai Suxin, who had difficulty moving her legs, was sweating profusely in front of the stove. Seeing her children return, the woman was filled with joy, and the wrinkles on her face smoothed out. You two have sharp noses, coming back exactly on time. Bai Suxin brought over a plate of golden food. Eat the spring rolls while they're hot. They're filled with 9-eyed fish meat. It's a newly mutated species. No one's seen it before and few dare to eat it. It was very cheap, so I bought a lot. If it tastes good, I'll make more in the future. Mom! Meng Chao took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he took the spring roll his mother had fried. He took a careful bite. It was fragrant. The meat was sweet, a sweetness he felt he hadn't tasted in many years. This child, why are you crying just from eating a spring roll? Bai Suxin looked at Meng Chao, then at Bai Jiao. Bai Jiao made a small face and tapped her temple, signaling to her mother. Brother's brain is broken today. Show some respect. I heard you talking about your brother from outside. Meng Yishan walked into the house with heavy steps and was instantly immersed in the warm atmosphere, his fatigue vanishing. He felt everyone in the family was acting a bit strange today, especially his son. Why were his eyes so red? He didn't look possessed. He looked more like his wife after she finished watching those ancient Earth Korean dramas. In his memory, his father had always been a pillar of strength. Quick, turn on the TV and see if there's a live broadcast of the battle. Bai Jiao turned on the TV while munching on a spring roll. With the monster invasion tonight, every channel was broadcasting emergency combat programs. Latest news. At 18:55 tonight, the military's Battle Crab Commando Unit completed its deployment at the northern city defense positions. On the screen, 6-legged war machines resembling giant steel crabs appeared. Equipped with reactive armor, their slightly bulky shells were engraved with a large number of profound and complex runes. Dark red crystals were embedded in the gaps of the armor. Flame-like spirit energy crisscrossed along the strokes of the runes, flowing to the ends of the war machine's limbs. The constant hissing of spirit chi gave these biomimetic crawler tanks a grotesque and powerful feeling, a fusion of the steam age and future technology. These steel giant crabs are Dragon City's latest and most advanced war machines. The monsters of the other world will eventually be drowned in Dragon City's iron torrent. On the screen, the atmosphere was tense and filled with killing intent. Most residential communities had their doors and windows sealed. Machine gun and anti-aircraft gun positions were everywhere on the ground, with soldiers patrolling with guns on their shoulders. June and July are the breeding season for dozens of crustacean monsters like the flame black beetles. In the last 3 missed descents, the main invading forces were crustacean monsters. To deal with these, it is suggested that citizens use more armor-piercing rounds. We now have monster expert Professor Ke Jindong from the Biology Department of Dragon City University to introduce the habits and weaknesses of crustacean monsters in detail. Hello, Professor Ke. Hello, host. Hello, viewers. The host and the monster expert conversed fluently. On the screen, above a luxury estate, a bald, burly man with a tattoo of a skeletal tiger on his head rose into the sky. 2 9-ring ghost head sabers crossed on his back. Complex spirit patterns continuously emerged on his skin, glowing and gradually detaching from his flesh to swirl around him, forming spirit energy armor that could change at will. Ah! Bai Jiaozhao stopped halfway through washing the dishes, drawn by the screen. She watched intently, not at the 6-star Transcendent, but at the luxury mansion he had flown out from. That's Dragon City 1. Master Luo Wu lives there, Bai Jiaozhao lamented. I heard the smallest apartments in Dragon City 1 are 200 square meters. The decoration is as beautiful as a palace. It's not like our community, which reeks. They use the purest high-quality piped spirit qi, which smells sweet. Also, their property management company has its own main battle tanks. Over half the residents in the community are transcendent. They aren't afraid even if they encounter nightmare beasts. Pausing for a moment, she shook her head. Why say all this? One bathroom in Dragon City 1 was probably more expensive than a whole house in Tianfu Garden. Suddenly, a piercing alarm came from outside the window. 3 short beeps followed by a long siren. This was the level 1 combat readiness signal. The entire community cut off electricity and spirit energy supplies on time. All energy had to be concentrated and prioritized for the defense system. Alloy armor plates over 20 centimeters thick dropped, covering the windows of every household, leaving only fist-sized shooting holes and observation holes. Automated combat fortresses rose from the neighborhood wet market, small supermarkets, small squares, and primary schools. From the residence committee, rumbled a scarred, old-fashioned anti-monster self-propelled gun. The Joint Defense Tactical Squad also drove out a rust-spotted infantry fighting vehicle to form a mobile force. Tianfu Garden. Fortressization complete. The mist descended. Monsters appeared. Upstairs and downstairs, footsteps were urgent but not chaotic. Regardless of gender or age, all residents were mobilized. Former elite marksmen from the military were at their windows and balconies, forming crossfire through the shooting holes. The elderly, women and children also prepared emergency food and medical kits, picking up daggers, bayonets, and entrenching shovels. If monsters broke into the residential buildings, they would offer the final resistance. After decades of being baptized by wind and waves, the nerves of Dragon City people had become extremely thick. Meng Chao dragged a semi-automatic rifle to the living room window and skillfully used sofa cushions to set up a kneeling shooting position. He squinted through the shooting hole in the armor and looked out. In the pitch-black night, the mist that originally covered the field spread toward the city like the tentacles of a demon. Deep within the mist, red and blue lights flickered. The lights writhed, and monsters gradually revealed their hideous figures. The spirit energy oscillator set in the center of the small square continuously released infrasound waves inaudible to the human ear to attract the monster's attention. Sha-sha-sha-sha. Hundreds of flame black beetles were attracted, merging into a black torrent surging toward the main square. Each flame black beetle was the size of a calf. Their black metallic lustered shells were covered in flame-like markings. A pair of oversized mouthparts were like upper and lower guillotines, capable of biting through even an iron rod as thick as a bull's mouth. Shwa! The searchlights set atop the residential buildings suddenly lit up. Dozens of thick light beams tore the darkness to shreds, leaving the monsters with nowhere to hide. Zzz. Around the small square, dozens of high-voltage electrical towers rose from the ground, firing hundreds of blinding electric arcs, electrocuting the monsters until green smoke rose and they were unable to move. Chi-chi-shi-shi. Inside dozens of automated combat fortresses resembling tortoise shells, crystals were crushed, releasing high-temperature and high-pressure spirit qi to propel projectiles. They whistled out like a torrential rain toward the monsters. The principle was similar to an air gun from the Earth era, but driven by spirit qi, the lethality was naturally 100 times stronger than compressed air. The flame black beetles were first electrocuted into a daze, and then riddled with holes by the shooting. Even with their hard shells, insect juice splashed, and casualties were heavy. Ah Chow, how is the battle? Meng Yishan brought neighbor Grandma Wang over. There was also Grandma Wang's pet beast, a hound genetically modulated to have fangs like a saber-toothed tiger. The two families were very familiar. As soon as the saber-toothed hound entered, it circled by Jia Cao, wagging its tail vigorously. "It's okay for now, we've stabilized." Meng Chao turned back. "Grandma Wang, you should watch out for your own safety too." "Good kid, looking down on this old lady's old arms and legs, are you?" Grandma Wang said, carrying a shotgun and looking full of vigor. "Have you seen the chaos right after the traversal into the other world? How many zombies did you kill during the virus outbreak? How many years have you fought in the monster war? Back in my day, that old man of mine and I—" "Grandma Wang, I was wrong, I know you'll be fine. Please just look after my mom and sister." "Thank you." Meng Chao felt a bit of a headache. The first wave of flame black beetles was beaten into a rout, but the mist tonight was exceptionally thick. More and more flame black beetles surged from the depths of the mist, crowding the streets until their shells scraped against each other, creating sharp noises and even sparks. Hundreds of flame black beetles rushed toward the community square like moths to a flame, disregarding casualties as they toppled the first high-voltage electrical tower. Mountains of corpses blocked the shooting holes of the automated turrets. In the second wave of the attacking monsters, the shells of many black beetles split open, revealing huge transparent wings as they clumsily took flight. It's a variant of the flame black beetle, the flying flame beetle. Meng Yishan frowned deeply and wiped his face, kneeling at the shooting position next to them. "Ah Chow, it might not be so easy to get through tonight. The mutant insects aren't that easy to deal with. Conserve your bullets and wait until they are close to shoot." Of the hundreds of flame black beetles, about 20 to 30 were the flying mutant variants. They flew over the electrical towers and combat fortresses toward the residential buildings, where crisscrossing lines of fire immediately erupted. Unfortunately, the trajectories of the flying flame beetles were erratic, and their shells were slick and curved, making it hard for bullets to bite. Even with a hit, if the angle wasn't perfect, the bullet would just bounce off. "Damn, these bugs are too troublesome. Hitting them is just pure luck." Meng Yishan's first burst missed, only drilling a hole through a flying flame beetle's transparent wing while it continued to fly. He cursed impatiently. Meng Chao had no time to be nervous. He carefully watched the floating information before his eyes. The fire of civilization needs steel and blood to guard. Would you like to activate the first combat mission, Insect Hunter? Kill 10 flame black beetles and 3 flying flame beetles in tonight's battle to contribute to defending your home. Initial combat mission reward: 1,500 contribution points and the choice to upgrade any basic skill by 1 level. Activate. Meng Chao slowly adjusted his breathing and heartbeat, turning a deaf ear to the gunfire and the shrieks of the monsters around him. In a daze, everything went quiet. Every detail of basic marksmanship transformed into neural currents, surging into his fingertips like lightning, locking his fingers and the firearm together. His gaze seemed vacant, focused on no single monster, but rather scanning the entire battlefield. The monsters' trajectories, wing vibrations, wind speed, and direction all turned into dazzling data. "Ah Chow, are you scared? How about I do it?" Meng Chao had been aiming in a kneeling position for a long time, leading Grandma Wang to misunderstand. The old lady carried a large shotgun, but its range was too short for long-distance aerial targets. Seeing Meng Chao holding a semi-automatic rifle without firing for so long, she thought he was stunned by the monsters. She was anxious and a bit eager for action. Before she could finish her sentence, bang bang bang, Meng Chao struck. The left wing of a flying flame beetle was torn off from the base, spraying fluorescent green juice. The beast fell down lopsidedly. "Not bad, Ah Chow." Grandma Wang couldn't see the battle outside clearly, but just looking at the spirit Meng Chao showed while firing 3 shots in a row, she could feel it. The spirit in those 3 shots of yours isn't much worse than your granduncle when he was alive. Meng Chao's lip twitched. He had originally aimed for the center of the mouth parts, the biggest weakness of the black beetle race. A 3-round burst should have blown the beast up directly, but he was distracted by Grandma Wang's noisy chatter. "You really are my dear grandma." Meng Chao was stuck between laughter and tears. Information popped up in his vision. Heavily injured a flying flame beetle, contribution points plus 1.1. Normal level basic marksmanship proficiency increased by 0.8%, reaching 25%. So stingy, only 1 contribution point. But it still felt pretty good. He was becoming more familiar with the firearm, and the gun feel from his past life was gradually returning. Meng Chao focused his mind and unleashed full firepower, shooting more and more smoothly. Amidst the flickering firelight, information flashed incessantly. Killed a flame black beetle. Congratulations on completing your first kill and contributing to the defense of civilization. Contribution points plus 10, proficiency increased by 8%, reaching 53%. Killed a flame black beetle, contribution points plus 1.9, proficiency plus 0.9%, reaching 55%. Killed a flying flame beetle, contribution points plus 3, proficiency plus 2.5%, reaching 58%. Meng Chao let out a whistle, fully entering the zone. The rhythmic staccato of the gunfire made even Meng Yishan feel a bit hair-raised. He was usually busy with work and rarely concerned himself with his son's studies, but he had no idea high schoolers these days were this skilled with a gun. I was injured last year and it was hard to practice martial arts, so I simply practiced my marksmanship more, Meng Chao explained during a brief lull. I see, you've worked hard, Meng Yishan nodded, feeling a pang of heartache for his son. With the efforts of the father and son and other shooters in the community, the monster offensive was temporarily suppressed. Only one flying flame beetle landed on the residential building, waving its sharp mouthparts and stabbing into the exterior armor like a can opener, tearing at it frantically. It had only ripped away half a piece of armor before it was turned into a honeycomb by crossfire. The dense rain of bullets ignited the flammable mucus inside its body, turning the beast into a fireball as it fell. Cheers echoed from many shooting holes. Meng Yishan also let out a sigh of relief, a smile appearing on his face. Meng Chao, however, squinted his eyes. Something's wrong. A terrifying, mysterious monster hasn't appeared yet. I have to find it. Suddenly, he saw a giant, vividly marked flame black beetle, suspended quietly in the blood mist-shrouded night sky. Shwa! Its wings spread open. They weren't transparent, but faint gold, with two deep ghost eye patterns on them. The golden wings reached over 10 meters in length. With each vibration, golden powder rippled out like raging golden flames. That's it, the evolved form of the flying flame beetle, the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. That's it, the evolved form of the flying flame beetle, the ghost-eyed golden-winged flame beetle. Meng Chao's pupils constricted abruptly. A terrifying name surfaced from the deepest parts of his memory.